Hello everyone. Ever since the markets touched its lows in the month of March, they have seen a smart pullback. That has happened not just in India, but across the world as well. The market participants have been wondering as to what has been the difference between the crisis of COVID-19 and the crisis of global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. In our opinion, one of the biggest differences between the two crises has been liquidity. Now, liquidity is a very broad term. Within liquidity, we believe there have been two very important factors which have made a lot of difference. Number one, the timing of the liquidity. Number two, the quantum of the liquidity itself. The timing of the liquidity. During the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, the G4 central banks were quite late into reacting into the crisis. So the liquidity which was poured into the markets by those banks came at the later half of the crisis. During COVID-19, having probably learned from the past crisis, the G4 central banks were very fast and the whole liquidity game started in March itself. Secondly, the quantum of the liquidity itself. During the global financial crisis, the G4 central banks provided liquidity which was anywhere between 7 to 8% of the GDP of those countries. At the same time, the liquidity provided by the same central banks during the COVID-19 crisis has been almost double as a percentage of GDP at around 15 to 16% of GDP in the current crisis. However, liquidity alone cannot solve any crisis without sufficient support from the economy itself. But what liquidity has enabled and accentuated to a large extent in this current crisis is sector rotation to a larger extent than earlier seen. So we have seen sectors like IT, pharma, telecom and consumer staples which have inherent defensive characteristics outperform the market. If you look at the Nifty, excluding the BFSI sector, it is actually at a level which is higher than what it was before the crisis struck. The BFSI sector, however, is down close to 30%. Now within the BFSI sector, our earlier assumptions were that the banking system would need anywhere between 3 to 5 lakh crores of capital. Now that math was based on the assumption that there is about 100 lakh crores of banking book and there is about 10 lakh crores of banking capital. Now what's changed in this math is the restructuring which has been allowed by the RBI. To a purist, restructuring is very negative because it spoils the culture, and having learned from the past, we have seen that restructuring eventually leads to credit losses. But what it does is that it pushes back the need for capital to some future years. So the capital which was probably required in the next 6 to 12 months will now probably be required in the next 2 to 4 years. At the same time, there will still be profits which are likely to be generated by the BFSI sector. The sector as a whole is also sitting on a lot of investment gains on their books as of now. We have already seen a slew of private banks and NBFCs either having raised capital or being in the process of raising capital, which strengthens their balance sheets and gives them the leeway to keep going for the next 2 to 3 years. So, what are the expectations from the economy and what are the expectations from the markets? For the economy, we expect that the economic level that we saw in FY20, that same level is what we will see in FY22. So basically, we expect the economy to dip in FY21 and the same should get made up in FY22, taking the economy back to the same level as in FY20. So, what about the markets? Well, the markets have had a smart run in the last 3-4 months. That means that the immediate upsides may not be very large. So the markets, even though not showing very high upsides on the index itself in the very near term, are likely to keep compounding. At the same time, the sector rotation is likely to keep governing the markets even in the near term. Where, if you see a successful vaccine or a breakthrough or a sharp drop in the cases of COVID-19, then some of the other sectors which have not participated in the rally, which are BFSI and deep cyclicals, will likely make a comeback. Some of the sectors that we like, irrespective of the pandemic or not, are the sectors which are to do with the shift in supply chain from China, which is to do with agrochemicals, a little bit of pharma API, sectors which are linked to the PLI scheme of the Government of India. These are the sectors which we believe are likely to compound irrespective of the pandemic. Compounding interest, as they say, is like the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't understand it pays it. Happy investing.